Now, for those of you who don't know, horses have teeth on both top and bottom. So when they graze, they can get right down to the bottom of the grass and pull it up pretty much from the root. Cows do not have top teeth, they only have bottom teeth. So when they graze, they have to wrap their tongue around the grass and rip it out. So they cannot graze like this. So this spot you're seeing right here is where the horses were for a total of 3 days. And when you get down here and you look at it, you see that there's a lot of dirt. And we don't want exposed dirt. It heats up the ground, wakes up weeds, makes it harder for the grass to grow back. It's just all around not very good. Can make it easier for wind and rain erosion of the soil, and just not great. So this can only happen with horses because they're the only ones who can get down and rip it out like this. And mind you, this spot looked like that 3 days ago. 4 days ago now. So cows can only make a piece of dirt look like this by another means of mechanical compaction, which is just by stepping on it, which would eventually kill the grass down. But horses do this just by eating in just a couple of days if the area is small enough. If we actually come over here and look, we'll see how much this grass is eaten down. And this is only 1 day's worth of grazing. I moved them to this spot yesterday afternoon. And again, this looked like this. And you can already see there's quite a bit of dirt being exposed. But there is still quite a bit of grass that can be eaten. So they'll stay on this spot for 1 more day, and then we'll move them again. Now, once we get all of the fencing up, which we can't do right now because this is not proper fencing back here. I had buckets back there that had electric twine that goes through them. However, electric twine is a very, very cheap fencing material and breaks down in about a year's time from the sunlight and stops conducting very quickly. So between that and deer running through it, the whole fence line that we had set up back there has just been blown out. So there's no fence on the backside of the property, which means my horses could get out. That's all my property too, but they can get out and go to the road right there. Hence why we have them in this right now. But when we get it all set up, all of this will be fenced in. It'll be fenced in clear to down there and over there. And what we'll do is we'll start and start with 1 line, make it 2, and we'll have a line that goes from here all the way to the back. And the horses will have access to only that one spot. And what that'll do is it evens out the grazing. What you might notice is that this kind of looks tall, but this is actually like 95% weeds and very, very little grass. And then over here, you see a lot of grass. Still some weeds, especially back there, but that's a different story. Well, this is because horses will pick one spot to poop in, and you can see this even here. They've pooped in this one area, not evenly, and then they won't graze that area unless they have to. And they won't graze that spot for years to come. Even if they haven't been on the grass or that pasture for 3 or 4 years, they still will not eat that spot because they can sense that they can smell that they pooped there years ago, even though the grass is perfectly good to eat. So what happens is you get these favored areas where they graze and graze and graze and graze and graze, and the grass has no chance to recover. This is why an open pasture management style has a lot of drawbacks, and the pastures produce far less. If I could zoom out and show you, you would see that about half of this pasture looks like this, where it was eaten down a lot over the past 2 years, and half of the pasture looks like that, where it wasn't touched for 2 years. That's a 50% loss of production. And this doesn't just apply to horses. This applies to any livestock. They'll all do this. So we lose 50% of our production on our pastures and damage the other 50%. So all these little yellow flowers are buttercups. They're signs of overgrazed pasture, compacted soils, and just a general low fertility. And this is only 2 years, and these horses were rotated, just these two, between this pasture. There's another pasture right there. There's a lineup, although it's hard to see. And then another pasture right up there. And they're all about equal sizes. And they were rotated between them every time they would eat the pastures down. And even still, even with that pasture rotation, we have severe damage to the pasture. So, with a strip grazing style, which you put up a line and they have access to one strip of the pasture, they have to eat that entire pasture all in one go, and it more evenly distributes their poop, which spreads out fertilizer, because poop is a natural fertilizer. So it will still probably end up clumped like this, as you can see, but if they have access to only a strip at a time, and that strip is a spot like this entire side of the pasture from there all the way up to here is overgrazed pasture where they haven't been pooping. So if they're only allowed one strip, they're going to poop on that strip, which will help spread out fertilization. We can come back through after we move them with a four-wheeler or something that has a drag on the back to help spread out the fertilizer even more, which also cuts down pests. So once they have finished grazing, what you do is you set up a second line in front of, and then you open it up, and the horses or the cows or any other livestock will move forward to that fresh green grass. And then you take that line that used to be the front, and you just move it up. And then after that, you just keep doing that across the whole pasture. So once they finish eating this line, we'll take the first one, move it up, take the second one, move it up to where the first one used to be, and then they have access to this new strip of grass. And you just do that across the whole pasture. Now, is this going to be the end-all means of pasture management? Is it going to give me beautiful pastures for the rest of eternity? The answer, quite simply, is usually no. They're still going to have an uneven poop, and they're still going to graze very heavily, and there's still probably going to be a need for some amount of fertilization. However, what it can do is, instead of needing 4 or 5 bags of 60 pounds of fertilizer per acre, it can cut it down to maybe 1 and keep my pastures looking full and healthy, like this section of my pasture versus that section of my pasture, which you can see is all buttercups. And if I walked over there, there'd be very, very short grass and heavily compacted soils. So hopefully this will even out my pastures and make it stop looking quite so much like this, and we can actually get more use out of the pastures. Tomorrow I'll have to come out here and take this whole setup and just flip it over to this side, because as you can see, they cleared this area very, very quickly. And again, that's because of how their anatomy is formed. They can rip that grass out very quickly and all the way from the root, which can cause severe damage and stress to the forages. So as we do our fencing projects this year, hopefully we can get that strip grazing set up by about midsummer, because me and my husband both work full-time jobs, and we can really get this pasture coming back regeneratively and in a sustainable and healthy manner.